Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Cassidy. I'm the CEO of Shinydocs Corporation, and thank you very much for joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about making AI and automation part of your big data strategy, and looking forward to showing you a live demo of some new technology, and we'll cover some ground on how it fits with what we've been doing for the last few years as well. Some quick background, Shinydocs Corporation, we've been around for a number of years doing enterprise content management and document management related functions. We've helped some big companies build some new products, and we're quite pleased with that. In the last couple of years, we've been well known for our Shinydrive interface. This is the best-selling third-party technology on the OpenText platform, giving us the Technology Partner of the Year for OpenText 2 years in a row, and we're very appreciative of that honor. What I'm going to show you today certainly is very applicable to our OpenText customers, but it's also applicable to our file share customers, cloud customers, and anyone with a document management focus. So please don't feel left out. If you're SharePoint, if you're file shares or other things, a lot of this technology will apply to you equally, and I hope we give you some amazing things to think about while we're on here. I want you to start thinking about big data and what big data means to an organization. So big data helps with decision making. Big data helps with predictive analytics. The idea of big data is to bring in a lot of information, do some pre-calculation, do some reporting, and help it drive some future analytics, help it drive future workflow. The issue that I have with big data is typically it is mostly your structured data that finds its way into your current big data strategy. The things that you're using to drive your workflow tend to be stuff out of database that has a lot of structure associated with it. And when you think about your file shares, your end user desktops, and the other places where you have data, it is really overwhelming compared to what we currently call big data. For somebody who has their databases where they are driving some decision making and they maybe have terabytes of information, when you go back and look at your file shares, you might have petabytes of information in there. Also, when you combine that with the attachments to emails, when you have a look at ad hoc databases and like access databases and this type of information out there, it's really overwhelming. So I'd like to suggest that every piece of information that's out there that your organization generates, whether it's a chat history, whether it is a document, a contract, whether it is some type of ephemeral document like an email, it does have a lifespan, it does have value to your organization, it should be recognized, understood, and it should be perhaps disposed of at the appropriate time as well to kind of reduce your security footprint and reduce the liability associated with that data. But up until now, that's been a massive challenge. Having humans go through these huge amounts of data, to go through a file share and clean it up, change its taxonomy, classify the documents, it's just an overwhelming task. To have a few people do it over several months, you might get tens of thousands of documents classified, and that's great. But when you step back and look at how many hundreds of thousands or millions or tens of millions of documents that your organization is generating, it's a task that seems endless. And the only way to really contend with it is to have the robots do the work. I'm going to show you some of that today. We're quite excited to show how we layer that on top of cloud storage, on top of file share storage, and of course, across enterprise content management. 85% of your data is unstructured. It is dark. And what I mean by dark is the data itself is only useful to the people who know where it is. Like obviously, if something's only on my local desktop, it's only useful to me. If it's on a file share and only my group knows where it is, then it's only useful to my group. The idea of managing information in place on these things like file shares and desktops and email obviously is not very useful to an organization. It's a situation where it just remains dark from the whole concept of big data and trying to drive workflow and understanding your information. So that's where we layer on a process, what we call our cognitive pipeline. And it's really important to understand this data before you try to bring it into your system of record. There's a lot of value that is in the data that you should realize before it goes into the system. And some easy things to think about is attributing documents. For example, if there's some principles in the documents like organization names, people's names, PII, these types of things, you should know that as it's being ingested into the system. And it's very difficult to rely on humans to do that. And that's why we introduce what we call our cognitive pipeline. We let the computers do this heavy lifting. Because previously, if you'd use a desktop application, you might save it directly into your ECM. And what you get is the create date is the date that you just did that transaction. The owner is me. And that's about the only context that we give it. And if I'm prompted for some required attributes, then I might fill them in. But if it's a Friday afternoon and I'm looking to get out of the office, I might just fill them in with the first choice in every drop-down box. So what you get is sometimes high quality data, and what you get is sometimes low quality data. So rather than just going direct from a desktop into an ECM, we prefer going through this cognitive pipeline. And what that means to us is there's some technology in there, but I'm going to talk to you about business value as we look at these things. Like the understanding of the meta information and text extraction is really critical as far as your ability to search this information. If things are locked away, I'll give you a great example that I think everybody can relate to, like an Outlook PST file. These are giant files that tend to fill up file shares in people's desktops. There is really no value of that document as it is. All of the information is in those messages that are in there, in the attachments that are in there. So when you're bringing it in as part of an information governance or a management strategy, you need to extract the text and you need to classify this information and then make it available to your ECM and make it available to your ERP and other systems. Well, how do you do that? Well, you use a cognitive system that can extract out that information and rationalize and understand the data as part of a normal ingestion process. The next piece that's really interesting to us is what we call entity extraction. And this is something that has always historically been a little difficult, where you'd have to have a programmer sit down and do what are called regular expressions to try to figure out, well, are these words here? Is this an organization name or is this a person's name? And all that information is really quite difficult for a developer to create all the rules around what this might be. Well, the artificial intelligence engines, and what I'm going to show you today, work a lot differently. What they do is they work through the language and they understand adjectives, they understand nouns, they understand context around these words. So if you see a noun that tends to be around descriptive words that might be talking about a person, odds are that that noun is a person, and the artificial intelligence engine will identify that. So when we're doing entity extraction, what we don't do is have to have a developer write a lot of code to figure out all the different combinations of where somebody's name might be or an organization name. What we do is we just give it examples of natural language of where people's names are generally found within the context of documents. And the system learns the same way a human would learn. It identifies the patterns, and then it identifies, hey, that next word is probably going to be a person's name. It allows you to extract that out and then drive some workflow associated with that. The next piece along there that we want to talk about quickly is indexing. And indexing is critically important. And I think a lot of people miss the mark when they think about what the index is supposed to do for you. We have such a search focus that we want to have a big permissioned search index so that when I do my search, I get back my stuff. And when you do your search, you get back your stuff. Well, that's part of it. But one of the most important things about having a big index is being able to interrogate it and ask it real business questions as part of a context that is larger than the individual just looking for a particular record or a particular document. And what I mean by that is, we'll give an example of Google. Obviously, everybody knows that Google tends to be more useful than the search that you might use behind your firewall that's in front of whatever enterprise content management system that you have. Why does Google work great? And why does the other search not work as great? Well, I can tell you exactly why, is because Google indexes and re-indexes, and they do it with the context of the information. So the metadata, the entities, and the classification of the data is all done and redone, such that Google knows when something is a map location. It knows when it's a document. It knows when it's temporal information, like calendar entries. And then it makes it rational and relevant as part of a fast and pre-calculated search index that gives you, as a consumer, just a wonderful experience that we all experience all the time, whether you're on your iPhone or your Android or your BlackBerry or whatever you use. We're all constantly consuming this pre-calculated big index. And when you compare that to what you can do behind the firewall, well, behind the firewall, you just get search and you get keyword search and that type of thing. And what I'm suggesting is that you can get to the same level of comfort with information interaction as what you have with Google, by giving context to all of your business data. Not some of it, not just the important records, but giving it all of that information and indexing it and then making it relevant through entity extraction classification. And then all of a sudden your end users can start enjoying the process of using the system rather than just using it out of necessity. So traditionally, you're going to have an object storage out there. It might be cloud storage, or you might have an open text content server or a SharePoint. The first thing that we do as part of our Shinydocs experience is suggest to you that it has always been easier for end users to use their desktop the way their desktop works. So what I'm showing you right now, it just looks like a local drive, but anybody who's used our Shinydrive, and that's a lot of people now worldwide, will know that this is actually enterprise content management built into the operating system. So the permissions are being driven by ECM, the categories and attributes, everything is being powered in real time. So we have a version history, we have an audit history, all that power is there. But from an end user perspective, they double click on a document, they make their change, and they click save. It doesn't matter how complex the document is. All we know for sure is that it works exactly the way that we would expect any other application to work. So that's kind of step one. How do you start getting information into these systems? Well, I contend that you definitely give them something new. Don't give them a drag and drop tool. Don't give them a website. Give them exactly what they've been using over and over again, which works with their desktop applications, and then let the end user just start adding information in an ergonomic way. So as far as artificial intelligence goes, one thing that's really interesting about using something that allows you to provide a higher level of attribution to files, a higher level of understanding of audit history and how things work, what that means is you're actually giving context to this information. So for example, here's some open government data, and all this stuff we put in classifications for each of these documents. It's something that initially you would have to do by hand. You'd have to say, hey, this is an ECC guide. Something is a presentation or a project or statistics document, this type of thing. Without even realizing it, what's lovely, we have put an artificial intelligence engine in behind this enterprise content management system. So what that means is every time you save a document, it has a look at it and rationalizes and understands that, hey, it's Jason adding this document, and it has this temporal information, these dates, it has this file name, and it has this content, and Jason's telling me it's this type of document. And what's great about that is that teaches up our machine learning model so that we can go to any document anywhere and ask it, hey, what kind of document are you? I went to the desktop here, I right-clicked on New Report, and asked it, what kind of document are you? And it comes back and it says, and it's an ECCC report from the Open Government model. That is the first step in being able to drive some really interesting workflow and document ingestion. I'm going to show you some neat examples of that. But let's go back and see that again, because that kind of happened pretty fast. That was an open government example. I'm going to do it with more of a business example here. So I'm going to go into Shinydocs, into companies, and of course we've anonymized the information for the demo, but we have all of the companies that we've dealt with and sold to and all of the records associated with that classified so that we know exactly what type of documents there are out there. For example, this is of course classified as a license agreement. This will be classified as an NDA, and that allows you to do some neat things. Go to any document. So for example, unknown.docx on my desktop here, I'm going to classify the document, and the system knows for sure that this is a non-disclosure agreement. So I'm going to show you a couple of very cool things that we can do now that we have a system that is not trained by sitting there and giving it example after example, but you're actually training it by using the system itself. So every time you add a new document, it trains the system on what it means to be that type of document. The first thing that we can do is go to a file share and then interrogate that file share. And that's one of the very cool things that we do even before we migrate any documents, before we touch anything. We can go to the file share and identify what kind of documents are out there by temporal information, by modified date, by create date, by file types, and then even better, by what is the actual document type as described by humans. because it doesn't matter that we have this many PDFs or this many Word documents. What really matters is how many non-disclosure agreements do you have? How many license agreements do you have? How many scope documents? How many sales quotes? This is interesting information. As part of a file system analysis, we generate this report and show you for your data, this is your documents that are in there. It's really quite powerful. And this allows you to do some very cool things. From this level of understanding, we can go to any group of documents anywhere and ingest it into an ECM or into a cloud system and classify it as part of that ingestion to make it just more useful. I'm going to ingest this information here. Here's that same unknown.docx for my desktop. We got license agreements. We have, this thing happens to be an invoice. To have humans go through and double click on each document, upload it to the system and classify it would be a fairly expensive endeavor. But I'm going to blaze through this sample folder here in seconds and migrate it into our ECM system and classify it all at once. So I'm going to run my classification script. And you can see what's happening at machine speed is that it's looking at each document, comparing it to every document that it's ever seen before, identifying its classification, and then we're actually bringing it in. And I've created a migration folder in here, and see there's that same sample documents. We see it's come in here at 1:21 Eastern time. And here's that same unknown.docx from my desktop. Definitely a non-disclosure agreement if we have a look at it in here. And it's already classified as an NDA. So what's amazing is now we can start using this to actually drive some workflow and drive some behavior automatically. No human had to go in and say this is a non-disclosure agreement. The system just knew as part of the ingestion. So you saw me do about 15 documents in a couple of seconds. We could do terabytes of documents very quickly and just do it at machine speed. Humans don't have to do this. And the more you do, and the more accurately you do it, the better the system gets at it. That's what we call the cognitive migration. And it is fueled by your data types. And that's something that I want to be really clear, is that of course this is our Shinydocs data types, and these are the open government data types that are out there. For your organization, you're going to have your own document types. I know there's some big organizations out there that want to sell some AI engines. That's awesome, but they want you to use standard off-the-shelf classifications. But every ECM customer that I've talked to, they have their own records management classifications. They have their own record series and how they organize their data. We do too. So there's no real off-the-shelf out there. What we have to do is find the easiest way to train up an engine to understand what your document types are, and then have it go through your data to rationalize your information. And that's what we can do with this artificial intelligence at machine speed. So I'm going to show you something that's pretty cool here. Imagine now that we know how to classify every document automated. The robots are doing it for us. We know how to extract entities out of the system, meaning organization names and people's names and these types of things. And we can do it in real time, and we can do it anywhere. It doesn't have to be in some system before it works. I already showed you it's on my desktop. Well, I'm going to show you the future of where automation is taking us. On my desktop here, I have a non-disclosure agreement. And what's really neat is right from within Microsoft Word, I'm sitting here and I can ask, what kind of document is this? That it knows that I'm working on an NDA. And it knows that it's between Shinydocs Corporation and Amazing Corporation. We can even have it figure out where in the world should this document go. So what just happened there, and I'm going to pause and show you this really slowly. I clicked this Smart Save button, and what it did is it identified, hey, this is Amazing Corporation's non-disclosure agreement. So it saved the document into my enterprise content management system. It changed the name to be Amazing Corporation Shinydocs Legal NDA.docx, and it gave me the option to exclusively reserve it. So now I'm the only person who can access this document. And you might ask, what do you mean by exclusively reserved? Well, what happened in the background here look at, there's Amazing Corporation, and here's that document that I'm editing out here on my desktop. This is in my virtual machine, and it's in the Enterprise Content Management System. It is classified appropriately. It has been stored in an Amazing Corporation folder that was just created now at 1:24 p.m. Imagine what just happened here. This is a situation where the machines are figuring out how to drive your workflow for you. You are the knowledge worker, and you're going to draft this information, and you just click save, and the machine goes out and does everything else for you, adds it to your content management system, attributes it properly, perhaps kicks off a workflow, perhaps checks your CRM system to see if this customer has been added before. I showed you one example, but there's a lot of amazing things that you can do with this. So if I take it back to our slideshow here, I hope you see what it is that we're trying to say. We're kind of limited to our ability to ingest in information because our structured data stuff from Oracle, SAP, and PeopleSoft, everything else is pretty well structured, and we can cube it up and make some decisions based upon it. And the only thing keeping us from doing that same decision making based upon all of your email history, all of your document history, all of your chat history, all of that other unstructured data that just happens, the stuff on desktops and the stuff on file shares in other places, is the ability to ingest it, index it, and rationalize it. So coming back to this, I hope you can see how it is that by putting all this value in between traditional file shares, desktop applications, and then the places where you would like them, like your ERP, CRM, can start actually driving some really powerful workflows, and of course, solve that ingestion problem. Migration is probably the #1 problem that people have out there. And once you get the robots trained in doing it for you, I don't believe it'll be your #1 enterprise content management problem anymore. That's about all I wanted to cover here today. Everything that I've shown you here is technology that's available now, and we want you to start using it. Best way to do that is to run a proof of concept with us. Again, my name is Jason Cassidy. We'd love to drive a proof of concept with you, show exactly what we can do. If you want to do the proof of concept, please go to this URL and just fill in the card there. We'll be in touch with you right away. And happy, of course, to connect with you on LinkedIn and other places. This is my email address here, jcassidy@shinydocs.com.